All right, we had the reading there in Matthew 5 and verses number 38 and to 42. And we are continuing with the Sermon on the Mount. And for a lot of people, these verses are very difficult to understand. If you just look at Matthew 5 and look at verse number, 42? Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow of thee, turn not thou away. So if someone asks you for anything, are you just to give it to them? If someone just says, can I borrow this, you're just supposed to give it to them. Pastor Kevin, can I have your car? Am I just, here you go. Please hand over your family to me. There you go. It's like, is that what it's teaching? Some people have a hard time understanding the context of these words. And, once you see the context, it's actually quite easy to understand. All right? So look at Matthew 5, verse number 38. It says, ye have heard that it has been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. So once again, Jesus is continuing the same format of preaching that he has with the other topics. These things that you've heard said are actually from the Old Testament scriptures. So to understand what the context is of all this, let's go to the Old Testament scripture. Keep your finger there. Come with me to Exodus 21. Come with me to Exodus 21. You have heard it being said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. The title for the sermon this morning is an eye for an eye. An eye for an eye. What does this mean? And how does this make sense in context of the other verses that follow afterwards? An eye for an eye. Jesus Christ is quoting from Exodus 21. All right? Now, why Exodus 21 is important is because it follows Exodus 20. And Exodus 20 contains the Ten Commandments. We often refer to the Ten Commandments as the moral law, or at least a significant portion of the moral law. And then when we get to Exodus 21, we see the civil laws that are to be carried out if people break certain laws, if they break certain crimes. Not every sin is a crime, but that which is a crime needs to be judged, needs to be brought before the magistrate, before the court system, and judges are to pronounce their judgment in that situation. So if you look at Exodus 21 and verse number 1, now these are the judgments which thou shalt set before them. So this is how you pass judgment in a civil method. Okay, these are the civil laws. If someone breaks these things, this is how you're to judge in the court of law. I'm not going to read it all, obviously, but drop down to verse number 12, for example. He that smiteth a man so that he die shall be surely put to death. All right, so this is, you commit cold-blooded first-degree murder. Your punishment ought to be, if you're found guilty, is that person is to be put to death, okay? That is God's standard. That was a standard in Australia many years ago. That's a standard in many Western countries many years ago. Obviously, today they're not going to carry that out, okay? Today, you can go to Bondi and shoot 14 people dead, and you're still not going to be put to death, okay? So obviously, the laws of our land have changed, but this is what God's prescription is. This is the punishment that fits the crime, all right? Drop down to verse number 15. And he that smiteth his father or his mother shall be surely put to death. All right, so if a son beats up on their parents, the punishment is death. This is God's proper laws. Look at verse number 16. And he that stealeth a man and selleth him, or if he be found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death. If you steal a man, slavery, all right? If you participate in slavery or human trafficking against someone's will, you are to be put to death, okay? Some people think that the Bible condones slavery. No, it doesn't. If you steal someone and sell them, the slaver is to be put to death, okay? This is the proper punishment. Drop down to verse number 22. It says in Exodus 21:22, if men strive, all right, and hurt a woman with child, so that her fruit depart from her, and yet no mischief follow, he shall be surely punished according as the woman's husband will lay upon him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. All right, so let me give you the example of this. Let's say me and Brother Callum get into a fist fight. Okay, we start fighting for whatever reason, all right? And my wife, well, she's not pregnant, but let's say my wife is pregnant, and as we're having a fist fight, maybe she gets a little bit involved, or it gets a little bit, carried away, and she gets injured in that scuffle, all right? So that her fruit depart from her. This is not saying that she suffers a miscarriage, because it says that her fruit depart from her, and yet no mischief follow. All right, this is a baby that is born prematurely. Okay, a woman that might be pregnant, she suffers something physical, it might cause the labor pains to be brought forth earlier, the baby is born, but there's no damage. We know that babies can be born prematurely and they generally be okay, all right? But it isn't the best for the baby. It isn't the safest way to be brought into the world. It's also not safe for the mother, okay? But mother and baby end up eventually, it's okay, it's not good that it happened, but no one died, no big problem happened there. then it says the woman's husband needs to lay upon the man he was fighting with, this is what you need to pay us. This is what your punishment should be. You know, you owe us a baby cot or something. you know, and the judges are to, you know, just confirm that the husband's request, whether it's, you know, reasonable, you know, they would, you know, that person will carry through and do that. Then we get to verse number 23. And if any mischief follow, all right, then thou shalt give life for life. So notice that the mischief that follows is a life. If you lose a life, okay? So if me and Brother Callum are fighting, Christina, who's pregnant, you know, loses the baby, all right? It's a miscarriage or it's a stillborn child as a result of that, then it's life for life. Once again, it's a death penalty. And I think this life for life not only applies just to the baby, probably for the mother as well, okay? If the mother was to lose her life because of a premature birth, you know, she got damaged, she got hurt, then it's life for life. And then we get to verse number 24. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. So this is what Jesus Christ is quoting in Matthew 5. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth. He says, ye have heard it have been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. What is Jesus speaking about there? He's speaking about the justice system, being brought before a court of law, being brought before judges, all right? This is about a civil matter. And when you understand this, you're going to understand these verses, all right? If I just come up to you, hey, brother, give me your car, I say, well, the Bible says in Matthew 5, if I ask for it, you're going to have to give it to me. You're going to go, hold on, Pastor Kevin, this is not a civil matter, okay? And you start to understand the context of all this, where it belongs, all right? So life for life. Once again, if someone loses a life because of cold-blooded murder, or you just, you know, you weren't appropriate around a pregnant woman and she lost her life, or the baby's life, you are to be put to death. Then it says an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. What does this mean? Is this literal? Life for life is literal. We saw that already. Death penalty being prescribed in the previous verses. But does eye for eye mean literal? All right, so if you and I have I don't know, if I cause you to lose your eye, you know, am I to be brought before the court of law and to have my eye plucked out? Or if I cause you to lose your tooth, you know, am I brought before the court of law that they could take out one of my teeth in response? Is that what it's teaching? No. If we continue, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. Okay, I'm going to tell you what this means, and then as we keep reading, it'll make sense to you. What this means is the punishment must match the crime. Okay? If it's an eye, the punishment must be something equivalent to losing an eye. All right? If you lose life, it needs to be something equivalent to losing life as punishment for that cold-blooded first-degree murder. So, Pastor Kevin, this sounds very literal. If I cause someone to lose their eye, then maybe I should lose my eye. But if we keep reading, you see what, you know, it's being clarified. What we're reading about eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, this is a figure of speech to say that the crime must match, the punishment must match the crime, all right? The Bondi shooter who killed 14 people will not be put to death, okay? He's going to suffer something, probably life in prison, potentially, I don't know, okay? That would not match the crime, all right? So that is wrong. And of course, we live in a system, we live in laws that do not uphold the Bible any longer. Or if they had the laws of the Bible in the past, they've changed their mind because Australia is becoming more and more of a secular atheist nation than it ever was a Christian nation, okay? So our laws are constantly changing, but the figure of speech here, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, is the punishment must meet the crime. Because if you continue in verse number 26, it says, and if a man smite the eye of his servant, all right, let's say you work for me, you're coming in, you're my plumber, all right, and you do a bad plumbing job and I get upset with you and I smite you and I cause you to lose your eye or you go blind or something, right? If a man smite the eye of the servant or the eye of the maid, that it perish, he shall let him go free for his eye's sake. All right? So if I cause you to lose your eye, it's not that I lose my eye, but you get to go free as my servant. Now, again, we need to put this in the context of the Old Testament scriptures. If you sold yourself as a servant, not a slave, remember, slaves are to be put to death, okay? But you sold yourself as a servant, the maximum that someone could buy a servant was for 6 years, and they were to be let go on the 7th year, illustrating the Sabbath, okay? Slaves, they don't get a choice as to when they get released, okay? A servant can say, all right, I'm willing to serve you for up to 6 years. On the 7th year, I'm to go free. Let's say I'm working for you as your servant in the Old Testament times, and I've only worked for you for 2 years. All right? There's still 4 years to go. But you smite me for some reason. You think I'm a slack servant. You know, you whip me, you beat me, whatever it is, right? Not that you should. This is not saying that you should do that. It's just saying if it happens and I go blind, I lose an eye, then I am to go free after 2 years. I don't have to wait for 6 years. All right? That is the just punishment to the person that caused the guy to lose his eye, is that you lose your employee for 4 years. All right? You don't have him working for you. You're not going to profit as much as you could have if you remained on staff for the whole 6 years. All right? And it continues, verse number 27. And if you smite out the manservant's tooth, so eye for eye, tooth for tooth. There's the tooth, right? The eye, now the tooth. Or the maidservant's tooth, he shall let him go free for his tooth's sake. Same thing. If you smite someone, they lose their tooth, you're to let that servant go. They don't have to fulfill all 6 years of their service under your household. All right? So do you notice how verses 26, 27 helps us understand that tooth for tooth, eye for eye is a figure of speech. It's not literal, okay? But life for life is. If someone is a cold-blooded murderer, they are to be put to death, okay? So Jesus Christ is first talking about Exodus 21 when he says, "You have heard as it have been said." He's talking about civil laws, a court system, all right? Being brought before a magistrate, being brought before judges, that the punishment, this is instruction for the judges, this is instruction for the lawmakers, that your punishment must fit the crime, all right? That's how we get justice on this earth. That helps you feel like, okay, justice was carried out. I can move forward with my life, all right? So let's go back to Matthew 5 now that you understand the context of this. Matthew 5, please. And let's continue in verse number 39. Jesus says, "But I say unto you." Now again, he's following the same format that he has before. He's not saying that what you've heard before is wrong, and now I'm saying something correct. It's both correct. What Jesus is about to say in verse number 39 is correct, and verse number 38 is correct as well. It's like what we saw earlier in this chapter when Jesus Christ says about murder, like, the Bible says, it says, "You've heard thou shalt not kill," all right? "But I say unto you," I'm just paraphrasing, "that if you have anger, for your brother without a cause." All right, so they're both correct. You shouldn't kill, and you shouldn't have anger for your brother without a cause, all right? Like we've seen before, Jesus digs in deeper in a more self-reflective way about what is happening inside of man. You can say, "I've never committed murder." Okay, but you've hated a brother without a cause. Or, as he continues, not to commit adultery. Yeah, I've never committed adultery. But he says, "But if you looked upon a woman with lust, you've committed adultery with her in your heart." Okay? So we should not commit adultery, but we also should not, look upon a woman with lust. Okay? So Jesus is not saying, like when he says, "But I say unto you," he's not saying what was previously was wrong. He's just digging in deeper. Jesus, when he came to this earth and taught from the New Testament scriptures, he lifted the bar, okay? People were often thinking they were righteous because they've not done something physical, but Jesus always talking about, what about what's happening inside of you? What's happening in your mind? What's happening in your heart? Because these things are sinful to the Lord as well, all right? So when we get to verse number 39, "But I say unto you," he's not undoing what was previously said, okay? He's just going a little bit deeper. "But I say unto you, that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also." All right, so let's play this out. Is the instruction in verse number 39, if Brody came up to me, "Hey, Pastor, good to see you," slap. "Oh, thanks, Brody. Here's my other one." "Go again, Brody, please." Is that what it's teaching? Is self-defense wrong? No, we have other passages in the Bible that teaches us about self-defense. All right? Again, we need to understand this in context of tooth for tooth, eye for eye. Okay? This is, what's the word I use? Not to be taken hyper literally. Okay? The point is that the punishment must meet the crime. So understanding what being, as it said there, "Whoever shall smite thee on the right cheek," you understand the concept. All right. If someone smites me on the right cheek, if someone injures me, if someone wrongs me in the court of law, I need to be willing to hand over my other cheek. Okay? Now, let me explain this a little bit further, because Paul takes this concept and expands on it on 1 Corinthians chapter 6. So please come with me to 1 Corinthians chapter 6. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, please. 1 Corinthians chapter 6. Okay, but I say unto you that ye resist not evil. What's evil? Harm. All right? If you're taken to a court of law, people might find you guilty about something. All right? So you need to accept the judgment that falls upon you. All right? Sometimes judgment's going to fall upon you in the right way, and sometimes it's going to fall upon you in the wrong way. There are plenty of people in prison, even in Australia, that are in prison because they were completely innocent, and there's been false accusations, maybe a corruption of the court system, maybe bribing, okay, or being a respecter of persons, that there are innocent people in prison today, and there are guilty people that are not in prison today. Do you believe that? It's all over the world, all right? And, even in the most corrupt nations, of course, we know these things happen, but it happens in Australia. It happens in Western countries. But we need to learn that when judgment is passed upon you, that we're to accept it, okay? We're to accept it and not necessarily always fight for justice, all right? But let's look at 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse number 1, please. 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse number 1. It says here, "Dare any of you, having a matter against another, go to law before the unjust and not before the saints?" All right? So this is an example of people in the church that have a problem one with another. Me and Callum had a fight, whatever, all right? And I decide, you know what, Callum, I'm taking you to the court, all right? I'm going to sue you, all right? So this is the example. Go to law before the unjust and not before the saints. You know, is it right to take your brother to law, to the courts? All right? Now, let me just quickly say, sometimes it is, okay? For example, let's say a crime takes place, in the church. Let's say, hope you guys don't mind, Lockie, you break into Brother Michael's house, okay? And you steal his money and his wealth and everything, right? And you come to me, "Hey, Pastor, I need to confess something. I broke into Brother Michael's house. I stole." Well, Lockie, if you did that to me, I would say, look, that needs to be reported to the authorities. Because even in the Bible, stealing is a crime that needs to be punished. Okay, we've seen it before, where if you steal a sheep, you're to, repay, was it 3 sheep? And if you steal an 4, was it? And if it's an oxen, you're to, return 5 oxen, things like that. There is a time to take significant or larger issues, of course, to the authorities. Within some churches, sometimes abuse takes place, or sexual abuse. I guarantee you, sexual abuse, that kind of stuff is going to get reported to the police. We're not going to hide that and sweep it under the rug. No, okay? But what is this teaching us? Look at verse number 2 in 1 Corinthians chapter 6. Look at verse number 2. "Do ye not know that the saints shall judge the world? And if the world shall be judged by you, are ye unworthy to judge?" This is important. "The smallest matters." Brethren, when it comes to small matters, breaking into someone's house is not a small matter. Sexual assault is not a small matter. Okay? Small matters amongst brethren, it's better that we sort these things out than to take it to court. Okay? You don't need to always look for justice in the court systems. Why? Because, like Paul says, go to law before the unjust. People in the laws, I would like to think that our judges and our lawmakers and the jury system are all just and righteous and always trying to do the best they can, but quite often it's corrupt. All right? So are you sure you want to take it to unbelievers where there's going to be corruption? You're going to get a better judgment amongst the saints, all right, amongst God's people. But again, this is for the smallest matters. Verse number 3. "Know ye not that we shall judge angels? How much more things that pertain to this life? If then ye have judgments of things pertaining to this life, set them to judge who are least esteemed in the church." So better than taking a small matter between us to the court system, it is better to have the least esteemed to judge the matter. What does the least esteemed mean? Probably the person that has been a Christian the shortest period of time. Maybe a younger child, okay? We would often refer to these people as maybe the least. You've not been saved too long, or you're a younger child. It's saying that when it comes to small matters, they're going to judge better than the court systems. over small matters. But is that what we should do? Should we get a little child to judge between two of us? No, it continues in verse number 5. I speak to your shame. He says, look, the fact that I'm saying get a small child or the least esteemed amongst you to judge, I'm speaking to your shame. I'm saying this is a shameful thing that you would even have to do this. Because it continues. Is it so that there is not a wise man among you? No, not one that shall be able to judge between his brethren? He says, look, is there not someone wise in your church that can deal with this? All right. And of course, this has to do with Matthew 18. We don't have time to go through it right now. But you guys know Matthew 18, that if there's an issue between two brethren in the church, again, we're talking about small matters. We're not talking about significant matters where you've been, someone's broken into your house or whatever it is, right? We're not talking about those issues. But when it comes to small matters between us, the Bible says in Matthew 18, we're to go to our brother alone. All right? And if your brother will not hear you, then you take 2 or 3 witnesses, that every word may be established. And if that brother still would not hear, then it's brought before the church, and the church passes judgment. All right? But when you're bringing those 2 or 3 to be witnesses in Matthew 18, you want them to be wise people. You want them to be spiritual people. You want them to be people that love the Lord and love the word. All right? People that are going to be, they're not going to be a respecter of persons. They're not going to have, choose over their favorite brother over one brother. All right? You need a wise brother to come and judge matters between 2 brethren. But if you don't have any wise brethren, it's better to get the least. And again, this is to your shame. Don't you have wise people that can come and be a judge in your church matters? All right? So obviously, the best way to deal issues between 2 brethren that are fighting is with yourselves. If you can't work it out, you get 2 or 3 wise people, all right? People that are spiritual, all right? And if your church is so ashamed that you've got no mature Christians amongst you, then it's still better to go to the least than to go to court where the unjust will pass judgment in your situation. I hope that all kind of makes sense. Let's continue, verse number 6. But brother goeth to law with brother, and that before the unbelievers. Now therefore there is utterly a fault among you, because ye go to law one with another. Why do you not rather, look at this, why do you not rather take wrong? Why do you not rather suffer yourselves or allow yourselves to be defrauded? Nay, ye do wrong and defraud, and that your brethren. What is the wrong that is being done? You're taking your brother to court over small issues. Paul is saying, look, if you can't get justice in your disagreement, in whatever happened between you two, in a small matter, it's better to just take the wrong. Say, I believe brother Michael owes me $5,000, whatever it is, right? All right, look, that's not going to, look, it's a large sum. It's but is it going to destroy my life if I don't get the $5,000 back? Pretend, just example, right? Probably not, okay? So it's better to just take the wrong. If we can't sort it out amongst ourselves, instead of going to the court systems, just take the wrong, all right? Allow yourselves or suffer yourselves to be defrauded. This is the idea of turning the other cheek, all right? Someone's done wrong to you. Are you willing to suffer wrong? Are you willing to be defrauded rather than go into law with the smallest matters where there's going to be an unjust system against you potentially, all right? So turning the other cheek is this idea. Sometimes wrong is going to be done to you, okay? And, if you can't work it out between you, instead of running to the court systems, learn to suffer wrong. Learn to be defrauded. And this is one of the hardest things to accept. Like I gave the example, if someone comes and just slaps you across the face, is it easy to turn the other cheek? Oh, go for this one as well. No, that's a very hard thing to ask of. Being defrauded, all right, being allowed to be put in the wrong even though you're in the right is a hard thing to do. And so Jesus Christ is lifting the standard here. He's teaching us that an eye for an eye is not always going to work out. A tooth for a tooth is not always going to work out. Court systems will not always punish crime adequately, okay? Justice will not always be done, seemingly on the earth. And sometimes you're just going to allow yourself to be defrauded. That is the better way of living than seeking justice over every issue. There's a thing on the internet of people called social justice warriors. Every time they see something to be unfair, they feel like they need to fight for justice. And, this is a very childlike response to the world. Let me explain this. When I was a child, when I was very young, I thought everybody was good. Like, I know everybody's a sinner, don't get me wrong. I know no one's perfect. We all know everyone's a sinner. The Bible takes that clear. But I just thought people generally wanted to do good. People generally, even if they'd not read the Bible, will want to just not steal, not murder, right? People, I thought, would generally just want to be a blessing to other people, a help to other people. I can't remember how old I was, but at some point, something clicked in my mind, and I realized, everyone's wicked. It's not like everyone's good and they just get bad. No, everyone starts wicked because, again, they are sinners. And in general, everyone's selfish. Everyone's just after their own, and they're not willing to be sacrificial. Okay? And I remember that just dawning on me, and I'm thinking, man, the world is not what I thought it was. But I was a little kid at that point in time. I won't say who, but one of my sons has recently come to this realization. It's like he realized, hold on, I thought everybody likes me, or everybody wanted to be my friend. I realized everybody's trying to take advantage of me. I realized everybody wants to hurt me, right? It's like, oh wow, the world is different to what I thought. And there is something that, in the heart of a child, they're often looking for justice. And it's a good thing in many ways to look for justice. Let me give you an example. As a father of 12 kids, I always say to my kids, life is not fair. And it's not that it's not like I'm trying to be unfair with how I raise my kids, but naturally, there's going to be some unfairness, all right? Like, the older kids might be, oh, Dad, when we were that age, you didn't let us do whatever. But these kids, they're younger and you're letting them do this. How come when we were that age, you didn't let us? Well, life is not fair, all right? You learn, you grow, you change, right? Or let's say the kids are doing chores around the house, and I might say, you know what, you get the chores done, I'll pay you $5 pocket money, whatever it is, right? And maybe that day I'm generous, and I have a little bit more than $5 to give them. So to one child, let's say the older one, I'll give them $20, and to the younger one, I'll give $10. Okay, I gave them both more than they deserved, didn't I? I was more than fair, because fair would have been the $5. But you give the smaller child the $10 and the older child the $20, what's going to happen? That's not fair. How come he gets $20 and I only get $10, right? They don't realize they're actually getting more. I was more than fair to both, right? But there's this, and I'm saying that's the mind of a child. But sometimes adults have that same mind. And I'm going to tell you now, adults, life is not fair. Now, the truth is, God sees all things. God knows all things. All right? The truth is, all the books will be balanced when God brings his final judgment on this whole earth. Okay? And when you rest on that, you can get through life a lot easier. When you rest that God is always just. And I don't need to personally look for my own justice. If I get my cheek smitten, I have to be prepared to give my other cheek. Okay? If I'm defrauded, if I'm done wrong, and I just can't get justice, I have to learn to let it go. I have to learn how to be defrauded. I have to learn how to be wronged. All right? And I can do that because I know God sees all things. I know God sees me being defrauded. I know God sees me being wronged. Again, as a child, I struggled with this a little bit. And it's this thing that you're always looking for justice, right? And what helped me when I was a little kid is in Genesis. When God says to Abraham, I will bless them that bless thee, and I will curse them that curseth thee. When I read those words as a young child, a young teenager, that God said to Abraham, it gave me so much peace. Honestly, I just thought, okay, God, if someone wrongs me, you'll take care of it. I don't need to take care of it. And Lord, if someone does good to me, you'll take care of them. All right, this is a good promise. I don't always need to chase justice. I don't need, if my cheek is smitten, I don't always need to get his cheek smitten. You know what I mean? I don't have to render evil for evil. God, you see it all. And that gave me such contentment and joy in my heart that I learned at a young age, as a young teenager, that I'm not always going to get seemingly justice in this world, but that God's going to take care of it. And I'm fine with it. I was fine with it. And then I went to my first independent Baptist church. And I was told, hey, Kevin, those verses are not for you. That's for the Jews. Like, what? These verses that got me through life, these verses that got me excited that God sees all things and would judge all things, that's not for me. You know? And then you read Galatians 3, and you read about the promises that were made to Abraham, were also made to his seed, and that seed is Christ. And that if you're in Christ Jesus, you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. Galatians 3. So, you know, even though, I'm being taught something incorrectly there, that's not for you as God's child, that's for the Christ-rejecting Jews. No. That promise was to Abraham and to his seed, who is Christ. I am in Christ Jesus because I am saved. Those promises are to me as well. All right, so anyway, so I could go back. Okay, these are good verses to hold on to. But that's the concept. The concept is, if wrong is done to you, you need to allow yourself sometimes to be defrauded. Sometimes you need to allow yourself to be in the wrong, all right? I say this to my young teenage boys all the time because they're working now, and sometimes, it depends on what organization it is, but sometimes your boss is going to accuse you of something you never did. You know, usually your supervisors and your managers, they're under a lot more stress than the regular worker, okay? Because a lot more is on their shoulders. Or if you're a business owner, there's a lot more risk that you're holding on to. You might have debts, you might have customers that have not paid, and you have to pay your employees no matter who has paid you or not. You know, your boss, your supervisor, all these people, business owner, are under a lot more stress than you are, all right? And sometimes because of that stress, they're going to lash out at you as the employee. Now, they shouldn't do that, but sometimes they will, okay? And there have been times when I've worked a job, you know, I've gone to work and I've been stressed, and I've come home, and guess who copped it? The wife and the kids. That should not happen. It's the weakness of men. You're having a bad day, you know, you're stressed, you come home, you want peace and quiet because you're trying to, detox from the, toxic environment at work, and, maybe the kids are noisy and like, shut up, whatever it is, right? Be quiet. You might be a little bit aggressive. And then you stop and go, why am I taking that on my family? Why am I taking that on my wife? They've done no wrong, okay? But it's the stress that even causes the everyday man that can, take things out to the wrong person. Sometimes your boss, your employer, will do the same to you. Sometimes something in the workplace has gone wrong, and they're going to say, hey, this should not have happened. Why did you allow it to happen? And you know what? I've tried to teach my kids, if the manager is truly asking for a reason why that happened, then just tell them, look, this is what happened. This isn't actually mine. This is what happened, and this is the situation. Hey, but boss, even though it's not my problem, I'm happy to fix it. What would you like me to do? There are other times that your boss is not asking truly what happened. They're just lashing out. They're just frustrated. Oh, you failed again. Why did you do that job? And they walk away. They're not really looking for a solution. They're not looking for an answer. I've told my boys, look, just suffer wrong. Just allow yourself to be defrauded. Just say, hey, boss, you're right. We messed up. I'll fix it. All right? Because more often than not, when that boss walks away, after 10 minutes, he turns around in his own head, goes, I really lashed out on that employee. That was not fair. I shouldn't have done that. It's probably not even his fault. I'm just so stressed that I took it out on him. But then you go, but you know what? The way he handled that, he just took it on board. Yes, boss, I'll fix it. You know what? That's a valued employee. Right? This is someone that I'm going to keep my eyes open for this guy in case of a pay increase, a promotion. This is a good worker. That's what happens. When you have the right response, you allow yourself to be defrauded sometimes. It's hard to turn the other cheek. It's hard to cop the blame when it's not you. But this is what Jesus is essentially teaching us in Matthew chapter 5. Can you go back to Matthew 5, please? Go back to Matthew 5 and verse number 40. Matthew 5 and verse number 40. All right, so we should not take our brethren to court over the smallest issues, okay? But if you are taken to court, be ready to turn the other cheek, all right? Be ready to accept the judgment, even if it's not fair. And then it says in verse number 40, And if any man will sue thee at the law. You see how it's still in the same context of civil issues, okay? And if any man will sue thee at the law. So, you shouldn't take a brother to court, but it might happen that somebody takes you to court. Doesn't have to be a brother, it could just be anybody in the world, okay? You've done me wrong, I'm taking you to the courts, you're getting sued. And if any man will sue thee at the law and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. All right, so if you say, hey, Pastor Kevin, can I have your jacket? Is this teaching that, okay, here you go, brother, have my jacket, and you can have my jumper as well? No, this is talking about the civil court system, all right? Sometimes people are going to judge against you. They're going to find you at fault, okay? And to make payment, to sue, the payment of this, what do we call it? Payment of this, there's a word for it. When you're sued. What was that, sorry? Sue for damages. All right. They'll say, in order for you to pay for it, you need to sell your coat or give your coat away. All right. I'm willing to give my coat away, but I'm also willing to give my cloak also. You know, it's hard to give things away. Whether you're at fault or not at fault, it's hard to make payments for things that are yours. You know, I told you guys a story back when I moved to Mullaney. When I first moved there, I wasn't familiar with the speed limits. And it changes so rapidly. It goes from 80 to 60 like that, and then back to 90 or something. Anyway, I was driving Isabel to work, and it's her first day at work. All right, and so we're running a bit late. So I'm like, okay, well, you know, it's 80. I know it's going to be 90 shortly. So I started going 90, like before I shouldn't have done that, but I'm just not. But the thing is, I got to an area that was 60. So I'm going up to 90 kilometers in a 60 zone, which I wasn't paying attention. Like I said, we were kind of new to the area. All right, and it was double demerits. The cop pulls me over. I lose, I don't know how many points, a lot of points on my license because it's double demerits, and a hefty fine. All right. Now, I'm like, oh man, I can't afford this. Like, you know, like, I have a choice at that point in time. I am at fault. I am at fault at speeding. I got the speeding ticket there, okay? Now, I can choose to do, look, it usually tells you can either pay it, or if you feel like it's been incorrectly given to you, you can go to court. You know, have you ever received that? You can actually fight. You know what? But the thing is, I know I'm in the wrong. I couldn't be bothered going to court. I don't want that stress in my life. And even though I have a due date as to when I can pay this fine, let's say the fine could be paid in 30 days, pretend, I don't know, I can't remember anymore. I just said, you know what? I'm going to pay this now. Right? Like, where is it that I can find some funds? Because I might have like a buffer, emergency fund, or whatever it is. Where is it that I can find some funds? Where do I have some cash laying around? You know, where do I have some things that I can sell? And I'm paying this immediately. Why? Because I don't want to think about it. I don't want to stress about it. I don't want to be wondering, you know, doing my head in, being frustrated. You know what? I'm going to pay this and I'm going to forget this. And when you have that attitude, you just get on with it. Or I can be for the next 30 days whining and complaining, right? Or even worse, let's take this to the court of law, hire some lawyer, which is going to cost me probably more money. You know, this system takes forever to finally be seen. And it's just this frustration, you know, things are not fair, you know, I'm fighting for my justice. It just goes on and on and on. Think about the COVID days. Remember the COVID days? I've got some friends that copped fines because of whatever. Just people that, you know, did something and it's like, well, you're breaking the, you know, the COVID laws, you know, here's a fine, whatever it is, right? Ended up, some of these people did not have to pay the fine, okay, because it, you know, whatever happened, you know, in the courts, it was found to be unlawful or unconstitutional, some of these fines that were handed out during COVID, all right? Now, if one of those brothers came up to me, hey, Pastor Kevin, what should I do? Should I fight this or should I just pay it? I would have said to him, look, just pay it. Just be stress-free. Be at peace. Be at peace in your mind. Don't worry about it. It's just money. It's just a bit of money. Go work an extra few hours, do some overtime, pay it off. I'd rather you be at peace and clear-minded than having to fight for justice. Now, some didn't listen to my advice, and that's fine. You don't have to listen to my advice. No, I'm going to fight this. All right, if you want. And I won. See, Pastor Kevin, I won. Okay. But it took like 3 years of stress and worry. Am I going to win? Am I going to get my justice? You know, is that worth it? Was those 3 years of worry and stress really worth it just to win the case and for the charges to be dropped? I won. Yeah, but you could have been at peace for 3 years. That's the kind of the teaching. You just look, okay, I'm going to lose my my coat, but you know what? You can have my cloak also. You know what? This is teaching us that we should not be so attached to our possessions and our wealth. That's essentially what it teaches us. Otherwise, you'll be frustrated. In Luke 12:15, Jesus says these words, and he said unto them, take heed and beware of covetousness, for a man's life consisteth not in the abundance of the things which he possesseth. Your life is more than your possessions. Your life is more than your coat or your jacket, okay? Or your wealth or paying that fine. You are more valuable to God. God sees greater value in who you are as a soul, as a personality, at the things that God can do in your life than worrying about your coat or jacket being lost because you're being sued about it, all right? Jesus is teaching us, be prepared to give more than what's going to be taken away from you. Because if you're prepared to lose more, you'll be okay with losing your coat, all right? Oh, you don't want my cloak? Bonus. I was willing to give my coat and my cloak. You only want my coat? All right, I was willing to give my cloak as well. Turns out better for me, right? That you didn't come and take that off me. So Jesus is teaching us here, don't be so attached to material wealth, okay? Be willing to be defrauded. It's hard. It's a hard thing. It's a hard lesson. And maybe it's a lesson that we need to hear coming into 2026. I promise you now, you're going to be wronged at times. I promise you, people are going to lie about you at times. Have people lied about you ever in life? There was a time, again, you learn things, you mature, you grow, you learn from Jesus. There was a time when people would lie about me, and I would feel compelled that I have to defend myself. I felt like I have to give an answer. And I started to realize, you know what? I don't have to give an answer to every lie. Like, having to fight back and give an answer is very frustrating. Like, it's kind of hurtful because I've got to figure out why they're lying about me. I've got to try to undo the damage, which can be a long-lasting thing, can take a long time. You know what? I realized people lying about me is actually a positive thing, okay? Because it shows me who actually cares about me and who doesn't. Like, let me give you an example. I've given this example before, but there was, I won't mention names, but there was someone that was attending the church and they left the church on their own regard. That, people want to leave the church. I'm not against them. I'm not going to turn against them. I'm not their enemy. And then to turn to another brother that I know that says, I was kicked out of church. The reason I don't go to church anymore is because Pastor Kevin kicked me out. So for months and months and months, this friend of mine thinks that I kicked this person out of church. And for months and months and months, he thought, that's very unfair. The reason that he kicked this person out of church is not fair at all. And so he's feeling bad things about me, all right? But it's a lie. It was a lie, all right? And then one day, probably a year and a half later, roughly, I get contacted by this brother. Brother, I need to know, why did you kick this person out of church? What happened? I was like, I never heard about this accusation. I never heard about, what are you talking about? I just don't think it's fair that you kicked him out. So I never kicked this person out. And then I have to explain, look, actually what happened was, but this is what I've learned. Sometimes people are just going to believe the lie because they don't like you. They don't want to be your friend, all right? And they're not looking for the answer on the other side. And I'm okay with that. If you want to believe a lie about me and then not be my friend because of that lie, I'm fine. Because if you knew me, if you truly were a friend, you would want to know my answer or my response to that issue. The right thing is, hey, Pastor Kevin, I heard this. This person's made this accusation that you've kicked them out of church. Is that true? Can I hear from you, Pastor Kevin? Well, I know you're trying to be my friend. You actually care about the other side rather than just believing the lie. If you want to believe the lie, go ahead. I'm not willing. Like, if that's what you're going to believe and you're not really wanting the answer, I'm fine. Because that shows me who you are toward me. I would rather have people that are genuine and loyal and friendly and a blessing than people that just pretend to be loyal and friendly on the front and are backstabbing you behind your back. All right, so I actually found this teaching to be really helpful of filtering out bad people in your life. I don't have to defend myself all the time. I don't need to, seek my own personal justice. If you want to believe something bad about me, go ahead. If that's how you really feel about me, if you want to know the answer, you'd come to me and seek the answer. I'll give you the answer. But if you just want to believe the lie, well, that shows me what kind of friend you were from the beginning. All right? So I actually find this method of living, letting yourself be defrauded, letting yourself be lied about, actually a lot of blessings come out of it. Like a lot of positives come out of it. And more often than not, I'm just at peace. I don't have to be stressed. Do you believe the right thing about me or do you not? It's like, which side are you on? I don't want to go through that. There's too much to do for the Lord than to worry about every injustice that happens in the world. And I'm just telling you now, if you're concerned for everything that seems like injustice to you, you'll never be at peace. You'll never be effective. You'll always be frustrated about, this is not fair, that's not fair, why this happened? Just look, let yourself be defrauded, go and serve the Lord. Because as we keep going, I'm going to show you some things that are going to open your eyes a little bit further to this teaching, okay? But let's continue in verse number 41. And whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. It's the same idea. If someone says, let's say I'm a electrician, all right? And someone hires me for the job, and I did the job, but they feel like I didn't complete the job properly. They take me to court. All right. If the court finds against me that you didn't fulfill your job, you need to go and fix it, okay. I need to not only be willing to fix it, but go an extra mile. Go above and beyond and do better or improve the work or, do extra, all right? So that way, if I only have to fix the one little issue that I didn't do, bonus, I didn't have to do all the extra if they don't want it. But I'm willing to. I'm ready to go the extra mile. I'm ready to, give more of myself. I'm ready to be defrauded, even if, they don't need me to go that extra mile. But I'm ready to do it. It puts you in the right frame of mind, all right? And then verse number 42. Now, doesn't verse number 42 make a lot more sense now? Because you understand the context of this all. Give to him that asketh thee. All right, you get sued. They find you guilty. This is what you need to do. Okay, I need to be willing to submit myself under the judgment. Could be right, could be wrong, whatever it is. And give it to them. Or from him that would borrow of thee, turn not thou away. All right, sometimes they might need to borrow. I don't know what this concept could be there, okay? But again, in the court system, they find, look, you don't necessarily have to give it, but you can let them borrow it for a while, whatever it is, because they need to repay this themselves or whatever it is. Be willing to do that, okay? Just give in sometimes for small matters, okay? When things are against you, be willing to be defrauded. Be willing to give up some of your liberties. Be willing to go the extra mile. If they want your coat, be willing to give your cloak also, okay? This is going to give you a lot of peace of mind. I promise you in a moment why, okay? But if you can, come with me quickly to Ecclesiastes chapter 3, please. Come with me to Ecclesiastes chapter 3. When it comes to Christianity, when it comes to the Bible, a lot of people come to Christianity, to salvation, because they want truth. Many times, it's like, I just want to know the truth, okay? And people that are seeking the truth will usually end up at the Bible, okay? Because thy word is truth. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, okay? And quite often with that seeking of truth, people are also seeking justice. And it's not that justice is wrong. God is just. We ought to be just people, okay? Justice is a good thing to desire. But the reality of life, many times you're going to live a life that seems unfair, that seems unjust. And you can choose to let it frustrate you or to just be defrauded and let it go. You have that choice. Again, Jesus Christ is teaching us something about our minds and our hearts. I want you to be at peace. Let yourself be defrauded. God sees it. All right? When God said to Abraham again, he that curseth thee, and I will curse thee, and that curseth thee. I know if someone does me wrong, God's going to take care of it. Like, I really believe it. And I don't need to see it. I've gotten to a point where, like, okay, God, I know you got it handled. I don't even need to see your justice because I know you're going to carry out justice. And if I'm in the wrong, and maybe I'm just confused, I think I'm in the right, but I'm in the wrong. It can happen, can't it? We're not so prideful to think we're never in the wrong. Then God, you're going to reveal it to me. You're going to chastise me with your loving hand and bring something profitable for me to live by. You're going to mature me. You're going to help me grow. You're going to give me the wisdom to make me realize, oh, I was in the wrong. What is it that I can do to make things right? But Ecclesiastes chapter 3, please. Now, the book of Ecclesiastes is written by King Solomon. And King Solomon, when he wrote these words, was in a depressed state. He was really cast down. He was trying to find meaning and purpose in the world without the Lord. And as he's tried to find meaning and purpose in the world without the Lord, he goes, it's all vanity. It's all worthless. Why? What's the point of even living? He gets to a point, this is better to die. He gets to a point where he says, you know what? It's just better if we were never born in the first place. Because if you're never born in the first place, you never have to deal with any problems. So when you read these words, you need to understand that King Solomon's in a bad place. Okay? And he's expressing the feelings of someone that's in a bad place. But he says in Ecclesiastes 3, verse number 16, King Solomon says, and moreover, I saw under the sun the place of judgment. The place of judgment is the courts. So King Solomon's looking at the courts. He's looking at the judges, all right? And then he says that wickedness was there. Instead of being a place of judgment and justice, he says, I see wickedness. Then he says, and the place of righteousness. I assume that's the church or the temple of God for him. That iniquity was there. He goes, I went to church or to the temple, whatever, your Old Testament applied to the New Testament, whatever, and I still found iniquity. Isn't that why people don't go to church? Oh, they're full of hypocrites. Yeah. Welcome to the real world. We're all sinners. I thought if I went to church, I'm going to be amongst the best people in the world. Well, you kind of are, because we're God's children, but we're still dealing with the flesh. The flesh is sinful. There's iniquity. Of course there's iniquity. People are wicked by default. If not for Jesus Christ, we would be destroyed. But it gets to this point, man, in the court systems, there's wickedness. Where I'm looking for righteousness, there's iniquity. Then he says in verse number 17, I said in mine heart, God shall judge the righteous and the wicked. For there is a time there for every purpose and for every work. So Solomon makes a decision. Instead of getting frustrated at the corruption, instead of being frustrated at all the sin of the world and looking for justice, he goes, you know what? No, I'm going to rest that God sees it. God sees, what does it say? God sees the righteous. God sees the wicked. All right? And he ultimately concludes that they're going to be brought before judgment of God. And let me tell you, that is what's going to get you through life. When things are unfair. When you feel like I shouldn't have lost my coat, but I was willing to give my cloak also and lost that as well. When you feel like you've been defrauded, when you feel like you've been wronged, you need to remember that God sees the righteous and the wicked. If you've been righteous and you've lost, okay, you've been wronged, don't you think God's going to look favorably upon you? God's going to judge the righteous. God knows you're right. Oh, my boss had to go at me for this mistake. It wasn't even mine. All right, you've been wronged. Okay, you've been embarrassed in front of all your other work colleagues. But God sees that you're righteous. God sees that you're working hard. Don't you think God's going to look favorably upon you and bless you mightily? If you go to Ecclesiastes 5, Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse number 8, Ecclesiastes 5. And by the way, King Solomon's the king. Even in his own kingdom, he sees corruptions in the court systems. Right? This is when Israel is at its peak. It's the richest, most powerful, okay, most wisdom-filled nation on the earth, where other kings and queens come and hear the wisdom of Solomon. And even at the peak of Israel's, reign on the earth, Solomon says there's still corruption. There's still wickedness. There's still iniquity. Okay? The only solution to real justice, I'm telling you now, brethren, is the coming of Jesus Christ. That's it. We can rejoice when things are just on this earth, but if that's what you're trying to hold on to or to give you joy and peace, you're never going to have it. You need to let it go. Look at Ecclesiastes 5 and verse number 8. Ecclesiastes 5 verse number 8. He also says, if thou seest the oppression of the poor and violent perverting of judgment and justice in a province. So you see perversion of judgment and justice. He says, marvel not at the matter. Don't be surprised. There's corruption everywhere. Don't be surprised. Marvel not at the matter. But then it says this, for he that is higher than the highest regardeth, and there be higher than they. Because instead of being frustrated at the corruption in the court systems and the laws, there's someone that is higher than they. He's talking about God. And God regards it. God sees it. God knows. God will judge in his time. And learning that is a bit of a struggle. But I'm telling you, once you learn it, it's like this freedom, this pressure, this burden just comes off your shoulders. It's like, Lord, I don't always have to justify myself. I don't always have to validate everything that I do. I don't always have to look for social justice issues to fight for. Lord, you see wickedness and righteousness. You know how to judge the best. Can you come with me to Psalm 73, please? Psalm 73. And if this is you, if you struggle with this concept, you're not alone. We see this a lot in the Bible, actually. The Bible is full of learnings about the corrupt systems. People being receiving brides, And in Psalm 73, please, Psalm 73, I love Psalm 73, one of my favorite Psalms, actually. Psalm 73, and I won't read it all, but look at verse number 3. The psalmist says, "For I was envious at the foolish when I saw the prosperity of the wicked." How do you feel when you see the prosperity of the wicked? When you see wicked people are the wealthiest. You think of, George Soros, Bill Gates, who else? I don't know. There's plenty of names out there, right? And look, these people are not out for our best. They're wicked. They hate humanity, or they hate Jesus. They hate the Bible. How is it that they're so wealthy? How is it that they're so prosperous? The psalmist says, I got envious. I was like, man, that's not right. I should be wealthy. Or maybe I should be wicked if I'm going to get the prosperity. All right? Look, this is the heart of a psalmist. All right? He's just being honest. Then he says in verse number 4, "For there are no bands in their death, and their strength is firm." No bands means no restrictions. Seems like they just get away with anything. Verse number 5, "They are not in trouble as other men, neither are they plagued like other men." No one seems to bother them. They're never brought before the courts. They never have to face, the accusations or the things that they've done against man. Verse number 6, "Therefore pride compasseth them about as a chain. Violence covereth them as a garment." Because they're so filled with pride, they realize they're just getting away with all kinds of disaster, all kinds of violence, and they're getting wealthy about it. Now, you and I can be like the psalmist, that's not fair. That's not right. How is that right? We're trying to live godly. We're trying to live for Christ Jesus. Why can't I have $10 million? Or whatever it is, right? And let's drop down to verse number 15. Psalm 73, verse number 15. The psalmist says, "If I say I will speak thus." He goes, look, I'm considering to share this thought with other people. "Behold, I should offend against the generation of thy children." But I don't want to offend anybody at church. Okay? Then he says in verse number 16, "When I thought to know this, it was painful for me." He's thinking about the injustice of the world. It's too painful. I don't like this. Life is not fair. Then verse number 17, "Until I went into the sanctuary of God, then understood I their end." He goes, I went to church, I went to the temple back then, okay? And I finally learned that they're going to have an end. I learned about their end. I was so frustrated. I was in so much pain. I was not at peace. But I went to the sanctuary and I learned about their end. Of course, these people are going to die and go to hell. They're going to suffer for all eternity. God will judge them. They're going to stand before the great white throne judgment of Christ. They're going to be judged and cast into the lake of fire and suffer forever and ever. So when you understand the end of these wicked people, it's going to look, God, you judge in your time. If it's seemingly they get away with riches and power and violence on this earth, I know when it comes to eternity, which is forever and ever and ever, they're going to face your wrath and judgment for all eternity. But me, on the other hand, who is in Christ Jesus, that has been washed by the blood of the Lamb, I'm going to spend eternity with Jesus. And this brings me to my final point. When things seemingly seem unfair to you, and you want to fight for fairness, was it fair that Jesus died for your sins? Was it fair that Jesus died for you? Is that fair? What do we deserve, brethren? We're the sinners. We're the ones that offended God. We deserved hell. We deserve punishment, don't we? We got something we didn't deserve. That's why it's called grace. We were given grace by God. Now, God is still just. He still had to punish our sins. He still had to punish our offenses and disobedience. And Jesus said, the Son of God, our Savior, he said, you know what? I'll take their sins on my body. I'll be punished for them. Is that fair? Like, let's say, I don't know, my kid's Johnny breaks the window in the house. and I take Sebastian and I punish him for breaking the window. Is that fair? It's not fair. Johnny should be the one that suffers, right? And this is the thing, brethren. We need to learn about the heart of the Lord. You lost your coat. You lost your cloak. You lost some money. Jesus gave up his life. That wasn't fair, but it was just. God balances the books. All of my sins have been paid for by the blood of Jesus. You know what? I can't lose my salvation. Anything I do that is wrong has already been nailed to the cross by Jesus Christ. Salvation is free. Now, we shouldn't go ahead and sin and do whatever we want. Of course not. We understand the Bible. God gives us direction. He gives us his laws to live by. We've got to live holy and righteous lives. But no matter what happens, I'm going to heaven. I never deserved it. And Jesus did not deserve to go to pay for my sins. Okay, Jesus did not deserve to die, to be punished, to be forsaken by the Father. Jesus did not deserve all that. But I deserved it. And he took my place. I mean, Jesus did more than just gave his coat and his cloak also. Jesus gave his whole life. And when we think about the end, when we think about eternity, that the wicked that seemingly get away with things, they're going to suffer for all eternity in the lake of fire. And for all eternity, I'm going to go to heaven, a place I never deserved because of the grace of God, because of his love toward me. Man, that changes everything. If I'm to live after Christ, if Christ is my example, if I'm to walk after his steps, who cares about my coat? Who cares about my cloak? Who cares if I have to walk an extra mile to satisfy someone's needs even though I was wronged? These things are insignificant compared to how much we've received from the Lord. So, brethren, the title for the sermon this morning was An Eye for an Eye. An eye for an eye. And look, justice is good. God's given us his word. God tells us how crime ought to be punished. If the laws of our land carried through with what God prescribes, we'll be doing better as a nation. We'll be better blessed. But don't stress yourself. Don't be at pain. Don't be constantly trying to chase justice every time something goes against you, okay? Because all you create is frustration and stress. Let it go. Let yourself be defrauded. God sees it. God is just. God will balance the books at the end of time. All right, brethren, let's pray.